This little segment is called Consults Over Coffee. How apropos as we're sitting here drinking coffee. Conversations in Healthcare. That's what this little program will be entitled. And for the people listening, I'm Dr. Michael Jones, and I'm joined today by Mindy Loiselle, who's a licensed clinical social worker. And we're here to talk about self-care and surviving 2020 and probably 2021, and God only knows how far beyond that. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you for inviting me. That's it's very ambitious.
So yeah, I think it's probably the understatement of the year to kind of say that these are challenging times.
It's obviously, I'm saying what is pretty generally agreed upon, that 2020 has been just a hideous year with challenges that I'm in my late 60s, and certainly in my lifetime this is way beyond anything I've seen, and generally people agree that 2020 has sucked.
That's the clinical term.
Yeah. Well, 40 years in practice, you got to be incisive.
Exactly. Just call it the way you see it. Well, no, it's we've had this conversation that it's been a really difficult, stressful year on multiple levels, and I think people are really grinding between COVID, between politics, between just the divisiveness that's existed, and now the economic pressures that you couldn't paint a more disastrous scenario for people's sense of well-being and safety and emotional well-being.
And I think it's important to honor that that's on all sides of the spectrum. I think that no matter how you feel politically, we're all exhausted. The intensity is extraordinary, and people are overwhelmed and concerned and frightened, and it goes up and it goes down, and it's variable depending on what part of the country you're in and your socioeconomic class, and a lot of variables. Nevertheless, it's an extraordinarily stressful time politically, and put a pandemic on top of that. And again, no matter what you believe about the pandemic, whether you think it's a construct that doesn't apply to you, whether you think it's bad, parts but not near you, or whether you think it's, you get my drift. It's still terribly stressful because there's this uncertainty about our collective belief in a reality. And then each of us, we were talking before we came on the air about biopsychosocial understanding of something, and each of us is depending on our own individual perspective on how we negotiate it. Like, if you really are very concerned about COVID, you still see people's variable behaviors in response to that. I don't want to out a dear friend of mine, but they are very, 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 very careful, but they take bridge lessons. It just depends on what you think you can get away with.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. You're right. It's sort of everyone sets their comfort level. The problem is those comfort levels have to kind of mesh with the people in your life as well.
Well, and then they don't. We're all coming out of Thanksgiving. And how many stories have you heard? As a therapist and as a person in the universe, I've heard a wide range of how has Thanksgiving been negotiated, and who shows up, and who's hurt feelings, and who thinks somebody is a rigid pain in the neck or irrational or whatever. And it's been very difficult for people. And Christmas is coming, and for many people, that has overlays that are extraordinary, and how people are going to make decisions about that affect their mental health and their identity and their sense of safety and ideas about life. And it's hard to even conceptualize how deeply this is affecting people. We were setting this up because I'm a mental health professional and I've been in the field a very long time, over 40 years. And I prefer to think of things as a process, that we are in the midst of a process. We don't know where it's going to go. We were talking again before the program about there's a Buddhist teacher whose phrase is, this is how it is right now. This is right now. So I'm hoping that we can understand that right now we're going through an enormously difficult process, and my invitation is that every single one of us do it with as much grace, self-care, awareness that we can, and that contributes to a process that can move us all ahead in a good way. That's my dream, and perhaps that's naive, but that's what I strive for. In my practice, with myself, with my friends, and sometimes I don't do it so great, and sometimes I do it pretty well.
Well, and I guess that's my question is, what are you seeing as someone in behavioral medicine?
For many months, and actually before COVID, every therapist I know has been inundated by referrals. I've never had so many referrals in my career. And honestly, I am having a hard time finding people to refer to. So what I am seeing is a huge amount of anxiety before COVID. So, I mean, certainly you see depression, certainly you see mixed depression and anxiety. But since COVID, people are scared. People are very, very anxious, and sometimes that can be overwhelming in a way that leads to a depression. Or if somebody has more of a tendency towards depression, that might be what you see, a collapsing versus a reactivity. But people are very scared.
Yeah.
With good reason. I mean, talk about reality testing, there are very scary things that are happening. Even if you don't believe in COVID, even if no matter
It's
where
true.
you are on the political spectrum, there's a lot to be scared of. I've had friends of friends talk to me because they want to leave the country because Joe Biden's going to be the next president. I mean, there's a range of responses to what's happening.
It's true. That's true. And I guess that, you raised the point that at least, I think certainly in this immediate area, and nationally as well, behavioral medicine resources are not widely available in the community. And they're often out of reach for the average working person.
That's very true. Guess I'm going to sound like Pollyanna this afternoon. I will also say that the culture itself has become so much more sensitive to mental health issues. I remember probably 15, 18 years ago, therapists were all talking about, things we used to say that were seen as very clever are in every magazine. You can't open a magazine without 12 tips for dealing with your anxiety, and that was many years ago. So we also have a resource-rich environment for a lot of help, even if it doesn't come from a traditional psychotherapeutic method. And so there, in some ways, oh gosh, talk about cliche, this is the best of times, this is the worst of times. There are some wonderful resources that if you just Google what to do if you're depressed, if you find a support group online, if if you, there's a lot of resources out there, and that's a wonderful thing.
Do you have any in particular that you point people towards, or you not? Do you not want to pick a side, or?
You know, what I really like is to help people anchor into why they're doing whatever they're doing. Like, what is the impetus to find resources for yourself? And then track that. Unless something speaks to you deeply, it's very difficult to keep it up. And that's people who are in a lot of pain. So I mean, there are resources I really like for myself and give to friends. I mean, I'm a 10% happier devotee. I think they do a really, really good job, and they're extremely topical, and they have addressed political things. They've addressed racial injustice beautifully. So, I mean, that's a site I really, I find a great resource. But
10% happier?
10% happier. It's an app. You can wait until they have a sale, and it's $69 for a whole year. And during the beginning of COVID, they did a daily free show.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, for months. And it was great. And it was free. It's fun to look at the background of 10% happier if you're ever in the interest realm of it.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm interested in. Is what are the things? What can folks do in their daily lives? Just simple things that they can do to kind of de-stress, maybe feel a little less threatened. Is there ways to shift their focus, or things that they can focus upon?
Well, I think you hit the two major categories that are incredibly useful. Either focus upon the things that enrich one's life. There's a lot of really good research on gratitude. There's a lot of really good research on thank you and gratitude and connection. I mean, all of those things are very wonderfully dependable resources for the self. And the other aspect is the going inside, the noticing the here and now. Anything that grounds a person into the right now. There's an intervention that's it's a multisensory noticing. It's, what do I see? 5 things. What do I hear? 5 things. What do I feel physically? 5 things. And you can repeat it. Like, I could, if I was doing it right now, I could say, I feel the cushion on my back. I feel the cushion on my back. So I would repeat those, and then you go to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. The reason I'm mentioning that is that it's a tried and true classic. They've taught it to people who might be in hideous situations. Sorry to get real grim on you, but people who are being tortured have used those kinds of techniques. Anything to stay right now in ways that you can control. Nobody can take away your breath. Your breath will end, of course, at some point, but in the meantime, your breath is a fantastic resource because it's always right now. So there are so many ways to use the breath, and the yoga community has a really good, rich variety of resources. Breath exercises on the web, but even just now,
there are apps. There are breathing apps.
There you go.
Right?
There you go.
I think I've seen it just, and as part of sort of relaxation strategies or things you can do on your phone, and I've seen people with little timers that go off on their phone when it's their hourly time to pause and reflect or do these breathing exercises.
What's the difficulty in our society is that we don't give ourselves permission, that we tend to be so driven, and anxiety drives us as well, as we were talking about earlier, that it seems kind of stupid. You seem like, oh, that yoga stuff, or oh, I don't need to do that, or people are going to look at me funny, or I'm going to think I'm, what am I, some kind of. There's so many ways we could talk ourselves out of doing resource-rich things. Like it won't work. I mean, there's all kinds of defenses around that. Like if I do it and it doesn't work, then boy, sorry I've started. And then there's the invitation just to try. Just
Absolutely.
to try. One breath. One
It starts
breath.
with one breath. It's true.
In the here and now. Come on, everybody. Let's all just take
one deep breath.
One breath. And you'll notice it's wired to your body. It's wired to your parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is a real deal. I'll throw it over to the physician. I mean,
absolutely.
it's like, it works.
Well, and it's funny. In the treatment of irritable bowel syndrome, one of the non-prescription medications that's been shown to be very efficacious for crampy abdominal pain is peppermint oil. And placebo-controlled trials, it's efficacious, it's safe. And I used to get people, and it's available in a lot of different ways, but I used to get people, they wanted a pill. Can I take the capsules? I'm like, yeah, you can, but I used to say to people, I think that peppermint tea is better. And they would say, well, why is peppermint tea better? I'm like, because you have to brew it. You have to take the 10 minutes.
And it's multisensory.
And it's like,
you taste it, you smell it. It's
right, and you have to pause. I'll be right back. I'm going to go brew a cup of tea. And we all need a timeout during the day.
Before COVID, one of my tried and true interventions, and I've been doing this for a long time, thank you, Elwood Thompson. I am getting no financial remuneration for this. I used to instruct people to go over to Elwood's and use their testers and smell all the different scents to see which one fed their spirit. Maybe you'll hate peppermint. You have that right. Maybe you'll love orange peel. You have that right. Maybe you'll love a lemon. Maybe you won't like any of them. Maybe you'll like rosemary. So tracking what you like, tracking what's a resource for you, and understanding that changes over time. Maybe you used to love peppermint tea. I used to hate chamomile tea when I did a lot of yoga teacher training. They were always about chamomile tea, and I was like, ugh. Well, I tried it again a couple of years ago. I really liked it. Who knew?
Exactly. Things change with time.
Things change.
We used to use, it was funny, fennel got used a
Yep.
lot. And for a while I had concocted this digestive elixir that was a mixture of aloe and peppermint oil, and we had some ginger in there, and I originally had fennel in there because fennel helped. Couldn't stand fennel. Had to take it out. so I may, if I ever resurrect it, I may have to have a with or and without fennel version of it. But you're right. It's just not everything works for everyone. And those I have these conversations with people all the time, which is, this is a great idea unless you don't like it. In which case, it's a non-starter, and we need to come up with something else.
And to have that respect for yourself, that you had respect for your clients, that you didn't have a one-size-fits-all, and this is prescriptive. And people don't work prescriptively. And by the way, I love fennel. I love that stuff at the end of an Indian meal, the fennel with the licorice.
Oh, absolutely.
Delicious. So
Right.
Everybody has their own way, and that's cool, right?
Right. I mean, but that is the conversation, and it is really just sort of recognizing. Whenever I would kind of suggest, okay, here's what I think is going on, here's a plan, then the final common step was, well, if I was on the other side of this conversation, would I go, that's brilliant, or would I go, what is this guy talking about? Because if it doesn't pass that test, you got to come up with a different plan.
Even in therapy, and I do a lot of CBT kinds of interventions, cognitive behavioral interventions. If we come up with this great plan, the magic question is, I always would ask, what will go wrong with this plan? Like, where are the faults in this plan? Because we all need to reflect, like, have a second thought and reflect back and check it out and be flexible. Be flexible with yourself, because gosh only knows it doesn't work unless you're not. Or it doesn't work if you're not.
Yeah. What advice would you have? I mean, for the average person, I think there's probably, I mean, we always used to talk about the concept of state and trait anxiety, right? And I think at the moment, probably
You got both.
you got both, and probably at record-setting levels. What would you suggest to people, just in terms of going through their day? Are there things or thoughts they can? You mentioned obviously the breathing is, take the time to pause. But
I
what
think
else?
the first thing to do is lighten up on the shame about it. I mean, understand that strong feelings of worry and anxiety are they're. What's that old thing? If you're not anxious, you're not looking around. I think that the first place is to accept that this is an aspect of this particular time in our universe, and cut yourself a little slack. Like, yep, I'm hideously anxious, or maybe I don't feel anxious, but my stomach hurts all the time, or I have a headache, I haven't slept well in forever, all the things that say all is not right with my internal world. And then allow yourself to start where yourself is, which is notice different ways that other people do that. Try on different models of, maybe you're a self-talk person and self-talk works great for you, and you say to yourself, okay, I'm really scared about so-and-so, and find some space in yourself for some compassion about that. I think developing more compassion for our feelings. I mean, CBT, there's a distortion about that, like you can control your feelings. And it's not my experience. Feelings happen mighty fast. Now, maybe thoughts lead to feelings, but feelings definitely lead to thoughts. So making room that your feelings are your feelings. Feelings are not actions. Feelings are feelings. So let yourself know that you're feeling something, which can create the space to create space around it, to create a breath, to talk to a friend. There's a huge difference between tension reduction behaviors, which are sometimes very cool and sometimes very dangerous. I mean, anything that transforms a feeling without dealing with the feeling, like having a drink. Yeah, does that calm your anxiety? Well, maybe for a little bit. I certainly have a drink myself, so I'm not downing having a drink. But are there any other interventions that you can make that can transform your feeling? And those generally have to do with, your temperament. Are you an inside person, or are you a more connection person? If you're an inside person, what are the directions you can do inside? How do you calm inside? And we talked about breath. We talked about, prayer, singing, movement. Movement is a wonderful way
Absolutely.
of transforming affect that is really available. Dance around your house, press against a wall and try and push a wall down with your hands as you scream. Do things inside, and then of course there's the outside things, connecting with, this is an inside and an outside thing, connecting with nature. We're sitting on my back porch and the sun is beautiful this afternoon, and just connecting with nature is, I think that there are now prescriptions for it. Take a walk outside. And then connecting with people. Finding people that are open to who you are. Notice if you feel better or the same or worse after you've been with someone. And pay attention to that. Now, we're all not delightful all the time, that's for sure. But overall, find people that you feel accepted by. Enough. Find people who give you space to be you enough. And connection. Connection is hugely important. And yes, it's COVID and it's very hard to connect, but there's still, I mean, I'm saying things that we all know. There's still walks. There's still sitting outside at the museum on all those nice chairs or on a blanket that you brought. I don't know, I'm rambling on, and what am I missing?
No, I think one of the things we've done is we do walk more. We're outside more, not just to get out of the house, but also it helps, I think, to be in contact with our neighbors. Not necessarily having deep conversations, but just being connected as a neighborhood. I think it makes a big difference. Just you don't feel as alone. It's just you break cycles of isolation, of, at least for me, of you can get into your own head and it can be a really bad place.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're out talking to other people, whether it's a relaxation technique, whether it's a distraction technique, you also tend to find out you're not as alone as you thought you were. Things aren't quite as bad as you thought they were. At least for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think again, it's societally we've sort of been encouraged to descend into tribalism, which is not healthy, since we all really kind of have to live together in some fashion. And the more we kind of get out and meet our neighbors and meet the people around us and realize that, you know what, we're not as different as we're sort of led to believe, I think, at this time. I think that's the beauty of travel. That's the beauty of getting out, is just the more people you meet, the more you realize the more people are the same.
Yeah, I'm really hopeful that as the intensive rhetoric, which I think has been very divisive, whether you're a Biden fan or not, he has a tendency to speak in calm ways. And that might piss some people off for sure, but overall I think the more we can reduce the intensity around us in any way we can find, the better off we're all going to be. So I live close to the old Lee Monument, and watching people walk up to it, whether they're walking up with curiosity or they're walking up with unhappiness, just to be around other people is, I think it's curative, it's helpful, it's kind, it's just what you're saying. It's reducing the sense of I'm alone, and increasing a sense of, well, it's a country with a lot of different people and a lot of different ideas, and that's a good thing.
So last seen my practice, people with physical symptoms largely attributable to mood disorders, affective disorders, is ramped up. You've seen the same thing, I'm sure. I mean, it's just, I think it's probably a time we all kind of need to be a little more patient with each other.
I like that idea, and I think that is a really good note to end on.
Yeah.
A little more patience, a little more acceptance, a little more
Pause.
Outside,
Take
a couple
deep
of more
breath.
breaths.
Exactly.
Maybe still go to Elwood's and smell the different scents that they have. I think they still do have testers now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe not, but there are things we could all do.
Well, and all do for each other as well, right?
Hear, hear.
So, well, thank you for the coffee.
My pleasure.
And thank you for the insight and the time on this gorgeous afternoon.
It was my pleasure to be here, and I wish us all well.